So good afternoon everyone and welcome. I hope everyone is well and coping through this unusual time. As you've probably heard already, we're quite new to this platform, so we've all just been trying to get our ducks in a row so that we're all ready to go. My name is Jane Lynn and I work at the Frankston-Mornington Peninsula Local Learning and Employment Network, and I really would like to thank you for joining us this afternoon for the information session to learn a little bit more about vocational education and training, or what we also call VET, for secondary school students in our region. We expect this session to run for about 40 or 50 minutes, including some question time. Please be aware that the session is being recorded for schools and parents to use at a later time if they need to, and that the links will be on our website. I also would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we meet on and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So for all the participants, thank you so much. Please feel free to use your Q&A button, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, where you can type any questions that you might have during the session. And we'll attempt to answer your questions as we go, but there will also be a little more time at the end of the webinar for some question time. So for now, I'd like to introduce all of our panelists that we have today. So we have Libby Rosignol, who works at Elizabeth Murdoch College. Libby is also in charge of their registered training organisation, which is at the school. She's a vet specialist, a careers practitioner, and has been in this space for a very long time. We also have John Collins, who works at the National Drones Institute. John has his own drone surveying business, and he will also be a vet teacher for our first ever vet aviation remote pilot licence program in 2021, which is an exciting new program that our students can enrol in. We have Alison Wall from START, which is our trade training centre that's owned by 13 of our schools, that sits on the Chisholm-Frankston site. We also have Angela Byatt, who also works with me at the Frankston-Mornington FMPLLEN, and she's our Structured Workplace Learning Coordinator, and myself, Jane, and I help coordinate through the FMPLLEN our VET Association, which is where all of our school VET coordinators get together to attend a meeting every term. In relation to what is VET, it stands for Vocational Education and Training, which in simple terms really means that it gives students the chance to undertake TAFE or tertiary course programs while they're still at school. Usually students are between year 10 and year 12, and a bit like a year 10 student can do a VCE subject as part of their year 10, they can do that for a VET subject as well. Each school has some slightly different policies around when and how students can start VET programs, but essentially it's for any student completing VCE or VCAL. VET is essentially like another subject, but its purpose is a vocational pathway. So VET programs often also include a work placement and a lot of practical hands-on learning. This in turn can give students a real chance to explore their chosen VET course, but also create options for a possible career. We've all worked for a long time, our panel members, in this space, and we can be a testament to how valuable VET programs can be. So it's a great opportunity for kids to explore what they might be able to achieve. As you can see with this table on the right, you can see that VET sits within the VCE or VCAL. So it can result in a student either commencing an apprenticeship or traineeship. They can complete year 12 and continue on to further education in either TAFE or attending university even after that. So it really does leave all their options open. Here's just a small snapshot of a lot of our exciting programs that we have in this region. There are many more, and I think what you'll find is that Chisholm offer a vast amount of our programs, but we also have a lot of our local schools that offer VET programs within their school grounds and offer them to external students as well. So all the brochures for many of these courses can be found on our website, and I'll make sure you've got all those details at the end of the webinar so you can find them easily. Additionally, we'll also put a link for the Chisholm website so that you can have a direct link to find them easily to save you searching high and low. Right now, I'd like to hand over to Libby as our first presenter, and she's going to explain how VET programs can actually contribute to VCE or VCAL programs, including a student's ATAR. So over to you, Libby. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad people could come and join us. Just to talk about VCAL and VCE. So students, whether they're doing a VCAL program or a VCE program, can add a VET course to their Year 11 and 12 program. In every case, the VET program contributes to the VCE or contributes to the VCAL. In a VCAL program, it's a mandatory component of the VCAL, but in a VCE, students have a choice of all the various programs that Jane sort of went through before, but they can choose to add one of those to the VCE subjects that they currently have. One of the things people get very concerned about, I think, is that, you know, if they do a VET program, is that going to contribute to to the VCE, in which case it definitely does, but two, is it going to contribute to my opportunity to get into a university by contributing to the ATAR score? So VET courses traditionally are done over 2 years. The first year will contribute to a Unit 1 and 2, or let's say a Year 11 subject, and the second year of the course would give them a Unit 3 and 4 or a Year 12 subject. So most VETs, there are very few that wouldn't give you a Units 1, 2, 3 and 4. When the student completes the second year of the program, it can then contribute to their ATAR, and it does that in 2 ways. Many of the VET courses have their own study score. Now, a study score is a score out of 50 that you get for doing a particular subject. Just like English and maths, you'll get a study score out of 50. And for that, to get that study score, you do some assessment at school, and then at the end of the year, we all hear about students sitting exams. So for some of the VET courses, and some things like sport and rec and dance, they do assessments at the school, and they also do an exam at the end of the year. For those courses, you get a study score just in the same way you get a score for English or maths, and that can contribute directly to your aggregate score. And your aggregate score is made up of your top scores. So you have to include English. Obviously, everyone has to include English in their top scores, in their top 4, and then the other high scores. So whatever the highest scores that you've got from your subjects out of 50, you take those top 4. And then they give you what they call an aggregate score. In the case where VET does not have a study score, and that is you don't do an exam at the end of the year, it can still contribute to your ATAR score, because out of your subjects that you do, they allow you to add a 5th or 6th subjects to your aggregate score. And they do that by saying you can take 10%. So say, for example, your 5th subject, you had a score of 30 for your 5th subject, that would allow you to add 3 to your aggregate score. So in order for those VETs that don't have study scores, they say, well, let's treat it like a 5th or 6th subject. We look at the score that you got for your 4th highest subject, and we give you 10% of that 4th subject. And that's probably a little bit confusing, but I think the message to take away is that no matter whether it's a VET with a study score and has exams at the end of the year, or if it's one that doesn't have exams at the end of the year, they still all contribute to your ATAR that allows students to get that advantage if they're looking at a university pathway. I can think that's probably about it from that, Jane. We can move on from there if you like.
No worries. So we've now got Libby just to chat about what a VET program actually looks like for the students.
Okay, so VET's offered, as Jane mentioned, at a number of venues across, we're talking here in the Mornington Peninsula. Probably the biggest provider would be Chisholm, and they have campuses, as you can see on the screen, from Rosebud right through to Dandenong and Berwick. There are also a number of schools that offer VET programs at the school, and the majority of those from when we are would be Mount Eliza, Somerville, Bayside Christian College, Elizabeth Murdoch College, and I think Monterey now has a course as well. Am I right, Jane? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are a number of schools that provide courses that students from other schools can access. To make that work well and to provide students with access to those courses, most of them run on a Wednesday afternoon or a Friday afternoon. And schools do their best to structure their timetables that allow students from other schools to travel either to Chisholm or the other schools that are offering courses. There is a bus that runs between the schools that makes it easier for students to travel between the schools to get them to those classes. So that's an advantage. And if you need more information about that, certainly go and talk to your VET coordinator or careers person. Generally, the courses run, unlike when you take another subject where it runs throughout the week, the VET only runs in the afternoon. So you're doing all your subjects for the week in one block of time. And they generally go for between 4 and 6 hours, depending on the course you're doing. The cost of the courses can vary dramatically, or not, they vary from school to school. So when you need to find out what the cost of the courses are, the only person who can really provide you with that information is your school VET coordinator or careers person. Because of the difference between government, independent and Catholic schools and different funding arrangements, everything is a little bit different. So certainly speak to your school to get more information about the costs. The costs generally relate around the materials though. And for some subjects, some courses you might do, there can be higher material costs than others. There can also be a few costs that may appear due through the year. So for example, there might be an excursion. So you might need some funds to go on excursion, or if I can think of the fashion course, maybe you need to go and buy some fabric to make up a garment that you've done the design for. So there can be some other minor costs through the year, but generally most of it will be in the costs at the start of the year. I can only stress along that it's important to speak to your careers and VET coordinators to get all details about how you would get to the venue if you're going to either Chisholm or another school, and what sort of charges are involved. So I think we mentioned before that some schools that run other courses for students to access, that can be run by making a partnership with another TAFE, such as Mount Eliza has a partnership with Box Hill TAFE. So look into those arrangements, and so you've got a bit of an idea of the organisation that your child might be doing the course with. I think that gives you a bit of background knowledge, and it'll also help you know what future options might be there in terms of pathways. I think that's probably, you go to the next slide, Jane.
Libby, that's it for you, I think. So thank you so much.
I think I'm on the next one too.
Sorry, there is one more, Libby. Here we go. Yep.
I think that I've sort of covered really about, I think I'm on the next one as well. I think that covers really about the ATAR. The ATAR is an important thing, but I think if you go to the next slide, it probably makes more, because that's the one as well. It talks about pathways. Yep. I think that's me too, yeah?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, in terms of going on to courses from when you finish year 12, if you don't get the ATAR you want, or you've done a VCE without an ATAR, which does happen these days, or you've done a VCAL course, which doesn't generate an ATAR as well, that doesn't mean that you can't go to university. And even if you're planning to go straight to university, I always say to students, you need a plan B. So when you're putting together your program for your year 11 and 12, and you've got an idea of where you'd like to go and what you'd like to do when you finish school, you should start to think of, well, what would I do if I didn't make that pathway directly to university? What's my plan B? And to help you with that, I can recommend, one, talk to your careers teacher, but there's a site called My Future that's worth having a look at. You can put in occupations or things that you think you might like to head towards. It can show you pathways to get into those courses. It can show you job potential. So it gives you a bit of background about what you think you might do, but also pathways. Every university and TAFE, all the TAFEs will have good pathways that you can use to get you into the university course you might like to do. And an example of that might be doing an early childhood course at a TAFE in a TAFE that could lead you into teaching at a university, or doing a nursing course at a TAFE that could lead you into going to nursing at a university. So I recommend highly that you check out those pathways and make sure you've got an idea of where you're heading, but you've also got a plan B.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Libby. And we're next going to hear from Alison Wall, who is our START facilitator at our Trade Training Centre. So, Ali, you have the floor.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks very much for inviting me. So, some of the things that VET can offer as a vocational experience, one of the big ones is that industry knowledge. So vocational education in particular is grounded on the industry and what the industry feels, the skills and knowledge you need to move into that pathway. So industry knowledge, employability skills, all of those things you need to be work ready and to move straight into that job or the pathway that you think that you would like to be in. Also gives you credit to VC or VCAL, as Libby did say, and has specialised knowledge. So if you absolutely know that you would like to become a veterinarian nurse, then Vet Animal Studies is absolutely a course that will give you the grounding in some of those basic skills and knowledge that you need to make that pathway, and also allow you to move through with that specialised knowledge. Next slide, Jane.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, we can actually play this, I think, from here.
We can play this. So this is just a very quick video. I obviously work at the Trade Training Centre here at Frankston. My role is to advertise, if you like, vocational education, and the Trade Training Centre is a purpose-built building that specialises in some of those areas. So
no problem. Let me just play this video for you all.
Yep, perfect.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. There we go.
So specialises in skill shortages, I think, is one of the things that needed to come out of that, Jane.
Did you want to go back to this one?
No, that's okay. So skill shortages. So the Trade Training Centre was built purposely to involve skill shortage areas and the learning, the ability to learn locally within those areas. Thanks, Jane.
Perfect. And this next slide's yours too, Ali.
So VET can provide credit towards the VCE VCAL. Choose studies that complement your pathway. Really important to do what you love. Always has been, always will be. So investigate that with your careers coordinators and your VET coordinators. Make sure that you're doing something that you do enjoy. One of the other things we offer at the Start Trade Training Centre are some tasters and events that allow you to come and try different vocational areas, and that can help you with those choices.
Perfect. Thanks, Ali. We might now hear from John, who is from Drones Institute. Thanks, John.
Sorry, thank you very much, Jane. Are we going to switch the video over or not to worry?
Sorry, here we go. So that should be on the slide for you now. Is that showing up?
I think it is, and there I am. There you go.
There you are.
Lovely. Thank you. Yeah, look, welcome everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. I work for a company called National Drones and National Drones Institute, which is a registered training provider. I'm actually a local person myself. I live in Frankston South, and previously ran e-learning at Chisholm some years ago, so I'm very familiar. Most of my family have taught in many schools on the peninsula, actually. But at National Drones, we provide CASA training and assessment. CASA is the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, and to a whole range of industries. And this course that we've developed, this Certificate 3 in Aviation Remote Pilot, is one that we're launching in schools in next year in 2021. It was meant to come out this year, but as we all know, we've had a few setbacks along the way. So I guess talking about myths and facts, I guess one of the important things to say off the top is that studying a course in remote piloting, which is a drone, it's a remote aircraft, is not about really having a career as a drone operator as such. It's more about augmenting your profession or your occupation across a whole range of industries. And that's really important to understand. In terms of the types of people that we train, you can see a list on the slide here of different industries that we work in. And just to give a practical example, last year, pre-COVID, towards the end of the year, I was up in Sydney training the New South Wales Fire and Rescue Services people up there to fight the fires. Recently, I've been training VicPol. Well, I had a particular member of the Air Wing at Victorian Police that was involved in the search and rescue up in the Alpine area recently. I've trained, over the last 12 months, I've trained marine biologists, surveyors, people that work at BHP in the mines in WA. As I said, there's just a whole range of industries where those personnel use drones in their jobs. And it really is something that augments a career now. Drone technology is a big disruptor across industries these days. You've only got to just have a look at, Netflix. If you're watching Netflix tonight on a movie, have a look at how many shots, when you start looking for them, were probably taken by a drone. We're all familiar with real estate and those sorts of things, but, people fight fires, they look for people, they do search and rescue, there's building and construction reporting, project management, obviously aerial photography I've talked about. There's lots of inspection type work, agriculture. One of the jobs that I do as part of my role as an instructor, I need to maintain my own currency. And I do have a local job I do down here on the peninsula where I do what's called a volumetric survey, just as an example. So there is a mulch farm out at Tyre, and rather than the staff there walking around on these huge piles of mulch that are, 50 metres long and 5 or 10 metres high, and trying to measure the volume of them, I can fly the drone over the top of the mulch farm, create a 3D model, and from the coordinates of longitude, latitude and altitude, I create a 3D map from which you can measure the volume of all these piles, and that's part of their stock take that they do every 2 months. And it's that kind of work. Another job I did recently, you're probably familiar with Point Leo. I worked with the ranger down there at Point Leo to do some 3D mapping of the dune area. It's been really severely damaged by the high tides and storms. And we created a 3D model so we could get in there and have a look at how we could help do some dune restoration. And that's a really valuable piece of work in terms of environmental work. So that's something that I really enjoy doing locally as well. And in the course that we're doing, that project will actually be one of the case studies that we'll be using for 2021. I guess, Jane, I'm not too sure if there's much more I can talk about there. I'm pretty excited about delivering the course.
I was going to say, we're all excited to get the course going. Can you think of things maybe that students might be able to use this course for, John, even as young people? Have you seen young people using drones and what they might be able to get from this course?
Well, I have. I mean, you know, obviously there's one of the examples up there, life-saving clubs. I mean, most industries where there's outdoor work involved, particularly if it's something that involves height or something where it's dirty work, drones are being used. And an example, you know, I do actually, as part of our course, I should say, as part of our certificate course, we've embedded the CASA license in it, so that you're actually a licensed pilot with the Civil Aviation Safety Authority as an additional qualification. So, you know, life-saving clubs is a good example. If you're a member of a life-saving club, they will need people with a drone license to be able to help perform their sort of search and rescue work and do shark watch and all those sorts of things. It helps you in your career when you're applying to get into, you know, the Defence Force or the Police Force, or you're applying for a job as an engineer. You've done an engineering degree. And you know, a lot of young people are obviously using it for aerial photography. There's just a whole range of uses. Every time I run a course now, I'm meeting participants that are using it for different purposes. You know, people that are doing, one of the ones that I trained, one of the people I trained recently was a marine biologist doing a study in Port Phillip Bay. I mean, I'm just constantly amazed at the variety of careers of the people that I'm working with. So it is quite an exciting new industry.
Yeah. And I'll let the panellists know too that we actually, a group of vet coordinators got together with John recently to actually have a play with these drones and actually see what it was like hands-on, to sort of learn how to use them and to navigate. It's quite a strategic thing to navigate a drone and think of all the different airspace regulations and all those sorts of things. But it was enormous fun, can I say, learning how to use them. So I can see students, we talk about skill sets a lot in the vet world. And I think this is a definite skill set that can be, like you said, augmented, John, into so many different areas of industry. So thank you so much, John.
You're welcome.
I think our next presenter is going to be Angela, who works with me at the FMPLLEN. And Angela's going to discuss, she's our SWL coordinator. And Angela can have a chat about how we actually incorporate industry and business when a student's doing a vet program. So over to you, Ange.
Thanks, Jane, and hello and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so I, as Jane mentioned, look after the structured workplace learning program in the Frankston and Mornington Peninsula region. So what that is I effectively engage with local employers and ask them if they would be willing to take on students for work placements, which supports their VET course. The structured workplace learning is different to work experience in the sense that when students do work experience around year 9, it's really just an observation period of time where they're actually looking over someone's shoulder in the workplace, just getting a snapshot for what work might be like, maybe in an area that they might be interested in. But structured workplace learning is quite different in the sense that the student actively attends and participates in a workplace. So what they're doing is meaningful and productive work, which is part or reflecting the sorts of things that they're learning in the classroom. So the actual placement has to be reflective of the course that the students are doing. So say, for example, a student might be doing building and construction. Their work placement would probably be out on site assisting tradies on the job and learning and applying those skills that they've developed in the classroom in a real world context. So structured workplace learning usually occurs 1 day a week. In the case of VCAL, students are actually allocated a day a week where they can actually go out into the workplace. In the instance of VCE, the students don't have that sort of luxury, so usually they will actually go out into the workplace on in a week block over the school holidays to get those real world learning experiences. The actual work placement, it really gives students a great understanding of what sort of experience they're going to get when they actually do go out into the workplace. They learn a lot more than just the actual doing of the role itself. It's those valuable employability skills, even things like knowing to get up early in the morning, how to communicate with adults, how different it is to school, really. So it's giving those kids a really good opportunity to really get some good additional experience in the workplace. It also gives the students an opportunity to develop some meaningful connections with employers as well. So in these work placements, they can actually transition from a work placement to potentially future employment or apprenticeship. So it's a really good way for these students to actually have those sort of connections, and it gives the employers an opportunity to try before they buy as well. It also gives the students a chance to add these employers as references for their resume. So it really gives those students a good competitive advantage, certainly against those students that may not have actually gone out into the workplace. What I do for our region is I, as I said, go out and find employers that are willing to take students on, and also place them onto a website called the SWL website, which there's a link on the slide there, but there is also going to be information at the end of this. You can actually go onto that website, and students can actually see employers that are ready to take them on and make those connections. So I would urge, if you've got your children considering doing VET, that they actually go onto that website where they can actually find employers ready to go. I think that's pretty much that slide. Thanks, Jane.
Perfect, Ange. I think there's one more slide for you about the jobs.
Yep. So myth versus fact. Myth, there are fewer jobs opportunities for VET graduates. The fact is that there are more than half of all new jobs projected to be created by 2022 will be achievable with a VET qualification. So, and I think we will probably find that given the current climate, that's probably going to be a greater number down the track. So it's very much a great pathway, and as it's been said before, it's certainly not going to stop you from going on to tertiary if you were to go through that pathway. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Angela. So what we're going to do is I've got the last slide here for all of our attendees to see the websites that can be really helpful to you. So we have obviously the LEN website, where there's what we call a PVET handbook of resources. This is where those individual brochures will be about all the programs that schools have on offer. So they're the programs Libby was talking about, where a school might have a VET program that's run at their site. That can be really useful for you. Also, we've got the LENs, they call us, and there's one in a lot of different regions, and we've actually partnered with Southeast LEN to do this particular webinar. So they're all of the Dandenong, Casey, Chelsea, base, all that area there. So please feel free to visit their VET. The VET IS just means VET in schools. There's some really relevant information about a credit to your VC and how everything works at the VCAA website. The LEN also have a Youth Pathways website, which has got a very special section just for parents, and it's got a whole lot of information about careers and pathways for your students. And I think sometimes when you're trying to decide what's right for a student and for students to decide what's right for them, you need information so that we can empower them to make a really informed choice. We also have at the LEN an FMP jobs website. Now, in this current climate, with jobs really changing quite drastically, as we all know, we actually have an fmpjobs.com.au that is specifically for people, not just students, but for the entire community to look for local jobs. So the only jobs that are on that website are actually in the Frankston, Mornington Peninsula region, which can be really handy. And that last website there is particularly what Angela was talking about with work placements for students. So we have got to question time, and can I just say that we have had quite a few questions coming through, and thank you to Carol, who's our executive officer, who's been answering some of these along the way. Someone has actually said, do students get to choose whether they want to do SWL or is it compulsory? So I might just pop, Ange, you're back on. If you want to unmute and answer that for someone, Angela, about do you have to do an SWL?
Okay, so with VCAL, yes, it is a requirement of the course. The regulators cannot mandate that work placement is compulsory, but it is highly recommended. There are a few qualifications where it is absolutely compulsory, but I think you'll find no matter what school you are attending or your child is attending, that it will be very much encouraged that the student will go into the workplace for all those reasons that I explained earlier.
Thanks so much, Ange. Now, Libby, I might just pop you back on if that's okay, because we've got a question. Can you hear me, Libby?
Okay, yep.
Yep, we've got a question here. Someone's a little bit confused about...
I was just typing a response. So I've done 2 responses. There was one below that as well. Yeah.
So what was the response to the visual arts one, Libby? So someone asked about the content.
10%, so I'm just putting in you get 10% calculated from your
Right.
lowest study score.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not an exam one at this stage. So thank you for picking that up. I'll fix up the website and add that to the website.
No problem. And someone's also asked if there's a psychology vet course, which is a really good question because we do have a lot of kids that enjoy social work and things like that or have an interest in it. The closest that I can think of, and Libby, you might be able to chime in here too, is that we do have courses like community services and a few health area certificates that could be that entry level of that psychology component. Can you think of any more, Libby?
No, so community services would be the best one because that could lead into sort of counselling, that style of thing. So yeah, that would be your best option if you're looking.
So for those that do have an interest in community services, or if you've got students that are, there's usually 3 components where a student does like a generic section of community services, and then it's either aged care, childcare, or disability work that they can actually choose a specific scope that they'd like to look at. So it can be a very interesting course to do where you can choose multiple different areas. Someone else has sort of said, can a student change a course direction? And that's really a good question, because I've got 3 kids of my own. We all know that they can change their mind very quickly. So I think that's where that term empowering them and informing them correctly about what they actually are looking for is really important. And it's not a lot different than a student choosing a VCE subject and then working out, I'm not really that interested. It's actually not that easy to change. In a school, you've got all the blocking complications of just picking a subject and being able to manoeuvre it. With a VET for secondary school students, it can even be more complicated because there is money involved, let's face it, but there's also the option of when that course is being offered and trying to manoeuvre other subjects around that. So can I just say it is important to know that a VET subject is actually what you would like to do, because it does require quite a commitment. So that's probably all I can say about that. Changing midway can be a bit tricky. So I dare say it would be best if the student make a commitment for that year. And another question was, what does the sport and outdoor rec course entail? And is this entered at year 10? So, Libby, do you want to talk about the sport and rec?
I don't know whether they're asking about sport and rec or the outdoor ed, because they are 2 different.
They are very different.
Yeah. So there's an outdoor ed rec course that I know that Chisholm runs. And as far as I know, all their courses, students in year 10 can start those. In terms of sport and rec, like at Elizabeth Murdoch College, I know lots of year 10 students start that. In relation to, and some ways maybe going back to can and change your mind. So it's always advisable to finish the year if you start something. If you don't go on and do the second year, all is not lost. You've gained some skills, you've gained some units towards your VCAL and VCE. So it's not like it's a waste of time. So if someone started something in year 10 and then they changed in year 11, they'd have time to complete the course by the end of year 12 if they did change. You know, because people do change their mind, as we know, or you get into something and, you know, you find new interests. So, but always try and finish the year if you can, because you do get that benefit, you know, getting more units towards your VCE or VCAL.
Absolutely. We've got, Melissa, thank you for your question. We've got her daughter's interested in interior design and she'd be starting it in year 10. Would she need to do this subject again in year 11? Great question, Melissa, because VET in Schools programs can be 1 year or 2 years. So most of them, to complete the whole certificate, so within VET, there's certificate 2s and certificate 3s. They all can be slightly different about how long they take to complete. So the certificate in interior design that I know, which is part of the retail training package, is a 2-year program. So she could do 1 year and she'll get credit for what she does in that 1 year, like Libby was just saying. Or if she completes the complete 2-year program and passes all of those modules that are listed with that course, she will receive a certificate 3 in retail, specifically for interior design. And that can be an incredible stepping stone if and when she finishes year 12 and wants to go on to higher education. That certificate can actually be a great, like an interview process and stuff for even university, for her to say, I've done Cert 3 in interior design. So they can be a really helpful tool when you're applying for tertiary education as well. And a lot of parents and students, if the schools permit it, for kids to do VET in year 10 and 11, because it gives them that 2 years to complete a certificate, so that when they're actually entering year 12, they have the space and time to completely concentrate on their year 12 subjects within their own school. Having said that, many schools do VET over year 10, 11 and 12. So it's a decision for the VET coordinator at your school and yourself to make. Someone a bit earlier too asked about whether VET is something you can do if you're not at school. Now, it's an interesting question because VET is actually an overarching training. So vocational education and training, if you think of Chisholm, for instance, that is a VET TAFE. It is somewhere where you do vocational training, and many, many, many adults attend TAFE training. They can do diplomas, they can do advanced diplomas. So what we're talking about today is specifically VET delivered to secondary school students, but there is VET as an overarching thing that all TAFEs offer to all their community, irrelevant of their age. But what we're talking about today is what can be on offer in that VET system just for secondary school students. So I really hope that answers everyone's questions. I think that's the last question we've got. Please know that if you visit our websites, we also have an info line there at the FMPLLEN. So if anyone has further questions, I'd be more than happy for you to send them through to our info line. I really hope you've enjoyed this webinar. We thought it was important, especially during the time we're in at the moment, that a lot of information nights and expos at schools and things like that have needed to be postponed. So we're very aware that these things might not be happening in your school. Just one more question. Nicole, thank you. Her son is interested in plumbing and building construction. Is he starting in year 10 and looking at the best pathway? One thing that I could suggest, Nicole, is that at Somerville Secondary College, at their trade training centre, because they have one too, they actually have a program that's a one-year program that's called Construction Pathways. And that is a very interesting program for students that are interested in the building and construction industry, but aren't sure if they want to be a chippy, a sparky, a plumber. And what they do is they actually, in the 4 terms of school, they try each trade to have a think about what suits them best. So they're gaining some skills about the construction industry, but it does give them the opportunity in year 10 to have a go at those different elements to see which one suits them best. So that is a possible option in that space where you've got a son who's not quite sure. I think Western Port Secondary College are actually going to offer that course next year as well. And it's about location too, about being able to get your students to the location they need to be at. Having said that, because we are running out of time, just one quick thing I might put to everybody is that as parents, we know that a lot of parents work and it's very difficult to get their students to their VET programs across the region. So the LEN actually coordinate what we call a PVET bus, which is a Peninsula VET bus. It only goes to certain locations, but it does cross over quite a lot of the Frankston and Mount Eliza area. So if you live in that area, it might be an option that your student could access that PVET bus to help them get to their location. But you could check that with your VET coordinator. They know the route that the PVET bus takes and they could help you. So I do, again, just going back to those websites, if you need to write any of those down, please do so. Thank you all so much for attending. I really appreciate it. And I'd also like to take the opportunity just to thank all of our panelists and thank them for their time and their expertise. I really value how you've been able to contribute to today. And sincerely thank you. So thank you, everybody.